International Initiatives and Lessons Learned. It is moderated by Jennifer Tridgell, independent consultant and PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge. Jennifer, please, welcome.
Thank you for that brilliant introduction, and I'm delighted to be here with such a fantastic panel today. We heard from our earlier keynotes about this rise of the rhetoric of digital sovereignty, how states, corporations, other stakeholders, the United Nations are increasingly interested in how they can leverage and benefit from open source software being the success story that it is, and also what they can do to try and invest and support its maintenance, including examples like Germany's Sovereign Tech Agency. Today, our panel is going to focus on growing resilience, international initiatives, and lessons learned. We're going to hear from practitioners from various government and corporate contexts, including working in partnership with EU and domestic actors, to think about how we can further this resilience. Open source software underpins today's digital public infrastructure. However, its sustainability and resilience depends on furthering global collaboration through multi-stakeholder exchanges, partnerships, investment, and support. States play a key role in this process, and they are increasingly recognizing that value and importance of open source as a driver of development, competitiveness, innovation, and interoperability, often adopting this language of digital sovereignty and resilience. Several are asking about how to further benefit in their public administrations and beyond, and thinking critically about how they can minimize the risk of regulatory fragmentation in this space, especially as legislation like the EU Cyber Resilience Act comes into effect in 2027. With that, it's enough from me. I want to hear from my fantastic panelists, and so I'm going to open the floor for the first question, which is, what does digital resilience mean to you and your work, and how is that term similar or different to this increasingly popular term of digital sovereignty? Gar made the mistake of smiling at me, so that means that you have to speak first.
That was the first mistake. The second mistake was sitting directly in Claire Dillon's eye line, and that's going to be a problem for the rest of the session. So if I take the second piece first, if you take resilience, so sovereignty is a potential strategy to help with resilience, but they're very different things. So I don't think they can be compared or contrasted. It's a different way of thinking about it. And I think the sovereignty, I mean, it's come up all through this morning's sessions. It's a complex issue. It's very ambiguous. We're saying, yes, we want to work together, but at the same time, no, not with you, or with you sometimes, but not with you over there. And it's going to be incredibly nuanced in terms of how we kind of sort through some of these messes. And it's nothing to do with the software. It's just a messy social system issue in a very complicated geopolitical environment. So I think that's that first bit. The digital resilience piece, so where I work is the health service. We provide the easiest way actually in the UK, it's the easiest way to describe it is it's the NHS in Ireland. In Spain, it's the agency at a state level that's running health services. So we run it nationally because we're only a small country, 5.2 million people, but it's providing everything, hospital care, community services, mental health services, the full gamut. And it's funny because we were talking this morning because you guys are involved in this as well. We have actually, if I go backwards, so the resilience side of it, we turned something off 2 weeks ago that's 50 years old. It was a 50-year-old system that was actually sitting there waiting to be turned off. In pre-2000, there was a Y2K fix put in, and that Y2K, and this runs one of the bigger general hospitals, right, in the country. There was a Y2K fix put in, and that Y2K fix, the guy put it in and said, yeah, 25 years, it's definitely going to be gone. Still there 25 years later, right? And so when you look at the resilience side of this, we're not dealing with, the step forward is nearly easier in terms of we have very kind of a playing field we can look at. It's the legacy that we're dealing with of 50 years of healthcare technology and technology in general, and pretty much anything that was ever brought into the country, somebody bought it, somebody deployed it, it could still be running, we're not sure. And I think that's the resilience side of it for me is it's trying to figure out how we deal and grapple with some of the past pieces. Like the go forward is clear. We've got better practices. We know how to do it. We know how to build software better. But dealing with the legacy of some of that mess, that is one of the biggest issues that I think, and it's an issue that governments have. Like it's not an issue that is unique to this organization, and it's an issue broadly. So how do we deal with that? And that, like, leave it outside of the open software side of it. It's the maintenance on some of this stuff. Like some of the companies are gone out of business. They don't exist anymore. What do you do? And there is an answer here that we don't want to be in this situation in 50 years' time. That's kind of the thinking is when we roll forward, where would we like to be based on where we are right now?
I really like that phrasing that you have around legacy, and it conjures to mind like image of soil. Like software has been layered on top of each other as the ecosystem has grown, become more complex, and open source has become ubiquitous. But some of those base layers could be, to use a term that Adriana described earlier, building on sand. They could be weak, they might not be robust, and so in a way, we are excavators digging down to those bottom levels of the soil and thinking about where are the critical vulnerabilities and dependencies. Gina, did you have anything to add on the topic of digital resilience?
I definitely agree with Gar. I see digital sovereignty as a means to get to digital resiliency, whereas sovereignty means control of your infrastructure and your technology, and resilience means robustness and continuation, and not having to depend on legacy systems. I think the Netherlands has this by now famous example of Microsoft shutting off the head prosecutor's email at the International Criminal Court, which is an example of failure of digital resiliency. And we need to work on our digital sovereignty to prevent things like that from happening in the future.
Yeah, and it's a great example. I incidentally had a stint working at the International Criminal Court, and they had a billboard at the staff cafeteria which said, these are the top 5 software programs that we use. And 3 of them were Microsoft Excel, and at least 2 of the versions were over a decade old. So it's a great example.
So just to build on that maybe, for me, if I start with sovereignty, sovereignty is about choice. It's not about necessarily saying that you have to build everything yourself, but it's about having the ability to choose whether who your providers are and what they do, for example, with your data, where they host your solutions, your services, your products, your business, essentially. Resilience, I would like to take at 3 levels. So you need individual resilience. So all of us need to be, and I mean every single person in this country, in Europe, in the world, needs to be careful with things like password generation. You know, if you have that very basic lack of awareness of managing and creating passwords, then you're actually failing resilience at the most fundamental level. Then you can take perhaps business resilience, and there you have to look at things like business continuity, but you have to also create your business around not just software but also hardware stacks that can operate and that are built to continue to operate in the face of attacks from adversaries. And we've seen multiple occasions recently of infrastructure attacks, whether at individual company level or at more state level. And then the higher level, which I think is the level we've been speaking about more today, it's about that ability of nation states, but also whole communities, to provide a sense of safety and, again, continuity. You know, how do we secure that ability to go about our everyday lives without fear of attack, whatever that attack might be? Because unfortunately, we are not just living in a world in which the geopolitical differences are played out in battlefields. They're actually being played out in our digital world, on our digital infrastructure. And it's, I think, that sense of safety that we all want as citizens as well that has to come through into the resilience plans.
That idea of safety but continuity really resonates. How can we make our software infrastructure more resilient, but at the same time moving forward with our government work, our corporate jobs, and so on, because we need to keep society operating, but it doesn't mean that we need to keep those same procedures for developing and maintaining or lack thereof for software that we've had in the past. And to build upon that, in seeking to further resilience of open source software within the public sector and beyond, have you observed how, if at all, governments are changing their approach in recent years? Are there any interesting trends or developments? And Gar, I'll start with you. You worked a lot on COVID technologies, and COVID can be very easily described as a major disruptive event within this sector. Have things changed or remained the same since?
I'd love to say they changed, but there is kind of it's a return to the norm a little bit. So everybody wants to quickly forget. We got through COVID, we all got through it, got out the other side, and with the greatest of intentions, we laid out strategies and plans we need to work differently and change the way we work, and we need people with these skills, and we need to do that. And then it quickly went back to the way things were before, because there's a gravitational attraction from that, because there's a giant volume of just organizational structures, process and procedures that just drag you back into that, unless you're prepared to actually disrupt. So I was fascinated by Adriana's talk this morning, because it's something like that where you bring in a new dimension to it and say, okay, we're going to go with this through a different direction, but it's the key enablers around it. So, we have this thing where we can create a legal structure in order that we can contract in this way. And those kind of things at a foundational level, some pieces have happened. So we've got GovTech initiatives running in Ireland. Internally, some of the stuff we're doing, it's moving in the right direction, and you can see it, but it's still not at the scale that it needs to be for it to have a transformative impact. I think that's the problem. So we can see some bright spots, but again, it's like, here is fascinating, because we were chatting last night, we were chatting this morning, it's all the connections, and then it's our ability to then leverage that to do something. And it's like, how do we put those mechanisms in place? And I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for us, because it doesn't, for me anyway, at a government level, it doesn't exist.
And Gina, in the Netherlands, what shifts have you seen in the Dutch government's policies, but also initiatives that they're getting involved in?
Well, I fortunately have a more optimistic message from the Netherlands, and that is that we managed to establish the open unless policy, which makes it mandatory for governments to, if they are building or procuring software and they're not choosing open source, to give an explanation as to why they're choosing the unless route, and it promotes open source working. So that's very positive for us. At the same time, we're also working on sovereign workspaces and trying to do that at a European level as well.
And Tanya, I was fascinated to read that at IoT Tribe, your tech accelerator programs have been developed for the Ministry of Defense, European Commission, European Space Agency, amongst others. What are governments increasingly looking to work on, and how in this space? Are there any interesting trends that you've observed?
Well, I think the first thing is that there is no one size fits all. So let's take those three spheres as examples of how different the solutions and the environments, the domains need to be. So, for example, with the European Commission, we're working on something called OCI, which is about leveraging many open source components and developing new ones that sit at the base layer to enhance energy flexibility across multiple domains. And those domains and scenarios range from dealing with maritime traffic coming into Malta, managing the energy grid in rural areas in Ireland, taxi EV charging in Austria. So really different contexts. And then, so that's being developed at this base layer. Then there is an orchestration platform. Horrible word, because it's a nice word, but kind of like nobody really knows what it means. But essentially, it's about that translation piece. It's about making sure that things are interoperable and that they can be called upon to be part of bigger solutions, or even replicating solutions elsewhere. So that bit is also really important. And then the monetizable bit sits on top of that. So what commercial products and solutions can you build that enable the whole thing to work and that actually demonstrate that you're adding value somehow? So that is really, that is a whole of system environment in which you have, the developers and a large organization, so for example, EDF in France or, municipalities coming together to really, in a very operational context, knit together all of the different components that will ultimately deliver a product or service of value. Not that there isn't value at that base layer, but that's one example. And OCI, for those of you who are developers, there is an open call at the moment, so 100,000 euros for a very specific kind of things that they're looking for that are missing within this base layer or even on the layers on top. So find me later if you like, and I'll give you the link to how to apply. Deadline's the 20th of November. The other piece was let's go to the other side of the scale, so the Ministry of Defence. And I was talking actually to Amanda, and it might be that actually open source and open source software isn't necessarily something that can be applied within that defense context, because we've already seen many instances of open source software being exploited. And it might be that, we have to be very intentional about the domains in which this can add value and where actually that's possibly not the best solution. And what was the third one? Because there was one in the middle. There was the accelerator of the MOD, the European one, and there was one in the middle.
And the European Space Agency.
The European Space Agency. So that was really interesting because we were able to take, and that was more open source data, so the Sentinel-5 satellites, there's an awful lot of open source components in that tech stack that is space. And it's quite interesting because when startups build their solutions, it's very rare to find a patent in there. It is all trade secret. It is protected by other means. But a lot of the tech stack is actually open source, whether it's pulling on data or other components. So those are three, I think, interesting different kind of approaches to how and whether you should use open source OSS.
Jen, can I just try to,
Absolutely.
And I don't think it was anything you specifically said, and I feel like I was very pessimistic about the future. I am actually very optimistic about it, but it's just
there are some challenges. Yeah.
There are some challenges there. I think one that's really interesting is European health data spaces on so within healthcare data, and making that data available in a standardized way so we can talk to each other internationally and interoperably. I can move around Europe. My data will be available to me as an individual, and it demonstrates where the regulatory environment can drive things to happen, because we've got dates and fines, and if we don't do it, and that drives us to actually go and do and deliver things, but it's intentionally done in a standards-based way. So we all will comply with this standard, and it's going to drive down into the software as well, where the software providers are going to have to comply with this standard, with these standards as well. And I think it's going to open up, there's a lot of opportunities that are going to result from that. So I think there's some critical pieces there, specifically on the health side of it, that I think are going to open opportunities for us.
Can I also say,
of course.
You've just reminded me of something else we did. So it was with the Politécnica de Madrid here in Spain. We worked on a platform that is providing that interoperability between healthcare data at the different levels of the system, because that is one of the major headaches across multiple European countries. It is kind of like primary care does not talk to hospitals. So we use the OMOP standards to help them develop something. So that there is just so much potential to work on huge societal problems through the lens of open source.
And they're global orgs. Sorry, Gina, you go. They're global standards bodies that are sitting there, but they're very unique and specific to healthcare. A lot of them, and they're trying to get there. So there's an MOU between the Open Air Foundation, HL7, and OTSI, who run one of the big terminology pieces. And so you can see these glimmers of people going, we're all in the same game here, we have to figure out how we do it. And then that drives again down into, how are we going to deliver against this?
Yeah. No, it's the same in government as well. Like, there are so many individual initiatives, great open source projects that can make a difference, but they need to find each other. And we need to fund them, is also something.
Yes, we need to fund them. And a trend that I've observed in recent times is there has been a recognition that, say, systemic under-maintenance in open source, it's a long-standing and very challenging issue, and there's been increased receptiveness, maybe limited receptiveness of states to invest in innovative solutions. Like, for instance, Germany's Sovereign Tech Agency. I was recently a co-author of a report on a European Sovereign Tech Fund, and also the European Union itself, and I acknowledge fully that these examples are all European, is looking at different structures such as an edict. And on this, I wanted to go to Gina to explain that concept of an edict, and in particular, the Dutch government's move towards a digital commons edict, and what that means for open source.
Yeah, so what I'm currently very excited about is the sovereign workspaces that we're building to replace the Microsoft Office suite. France and Germany were ahead of us when it came to that. They already have some in production called Les Suite and OpenDesk. And at a European level, we started to collaborate with them. So we found that actually it's being signed today, the European Digital Infrastructure Consortium for Digital Commons, where at a European state level, we will collaborate with each other to build these workspaces and do all these other important digital infrastructure projects together to build this sovereign infrastructure.
And when it comes to governments changing their approach on open source, are there any examples that the three of you would like to highlight as to what is working best and what is not working well?
Don't look at me.
I can maybe, so the Eurostack, that's quite an interesting one. I can understand the principle. I think that I'm a little bit cautious about how it will play out. And I think that we need to be really careful that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think that, again, it all comes back to geopolitics, but geopolitics operate up here. Beneath geopolitics are all sorts of things that need to happen. And I think that one of the things that can really help with our relationships with nations with whom perhaps we're not so friendly at the moment, moving, fast forward 10 years, hopefully we will be, really hopefully, we'll be in a different situation. And having things like an open source community that continues to have channels of communication, I think can be part of that new future. I mean, I think that we have to be very, very careful that we don't conflate things, I think is what I'm saying.
To add on to that, from a government perspective, one of our biggest challenges is collaborating with the open source community in such a way that we uplift them and we don't just come in and take, that we find serious sponsorship and create these policies that help them, and that we give serious funding. So initiatives at a European level like the Eurostack, Gaia-X, IPSAS-SYS, EDIC, maybe even a sovereign European tech fund, who knows, should all be leveraged to finding and funding these open source communities and to help build this alternative tech.
Gar, anything to add?
Back to me. So I think there's definitely some bright spots in terms of, so we work a lot with the Office of the Government CIO in Ireland, who's central government, and trying to figure out how to work in a better way, because we're we're the biggest government agency in the country, and trying to get that to work even internally, so department to department. So we've got a much better, we've all felt this pain, because it's like, oh no, we've got walls, and you've got walls, and we just stay behind them, and everybody's happy. You just give us money, and we'll do our job. But we found, there are definitely bright spots there where it's much more active collaboration internally. This is department to department, and you can see really good outcomes from some of this stuff. You can see that there's glimmers of it just showing up there. I think the international side of it, I think one of the challenges is going to be, and I'm really excited about what you announced there, right, in terms of that kind of broader digital consortium, because it's how do we get involved with each other, because we've had and everybody's done the like ministerial trip, and you go over and you meet somebody meet the ambassador, you eat the Ferrero Rocher, you move on, you do all this good stuff. That joke only translates to some people. But it's then, what's the next step, and what's the structure, and how much are we prepared to actually double down and invest in this? Because we can do the shaking of hands and we can sign things, but it's actually like when the rubber hits the road, it's like we have to go and actually do something and deliver something, right? And I think John said it this morning, it's like, you got to go and do, like you got to go and deliver something.
Yeah.
And that's the demonstration of this, and we did it, and just to go back to the COVID piece, we demonstrated that we could do it during COVID. And I worked on digital contact tracing, so we would have worked with the Dutch team like very closely. We were talking to those guys every day, right? We were talking to so there was like 40, 50 teams around the world that talked to each other all the time. There was like buzzing Slack channels that were going morning, noon, and night trying to solve a problem. So we figured out that we could do it. And then it all began to just dissipate because there was no driver. So we had the crisis, and then we had a massive cyber attack. Again, the resilience comes back into it in 21. And then the Ukraine war, 100,000 people land in. And it's like, so you've got different forms of crises. And I think it's trying to figure out what level of readiness do we have to respond to the next thing. And so you can see that we can do it, and we've demonstrated, so there's a confidence there, but you don't want to, like, you want to make sure you've got the supports in place that when it does happen, we're not scrambling the way we were scrambling last time.
Yeah. Can I add on to that? As government, I would say we need to get out of our own way sometimes. It happens too often that there's really nice solutions that and then our own sourcing and procurement gets in the way, because these organizations or these communities sometimes need to be of a certain size, and they need to have a portfolio, and they need to have this. And then we choose the big tech solutions again. So it's also something internally that we have to restructure and improve. No.
And just beyond the Ferrero Rocher diplomacy kind of scenario that you put forward, Gar, I think there are a couple of things there. So first of all, we do have a European tech fund. It's called the EIC, so the European Innovation Council. And I think that, again, any founders in the room that have ambitions to build something that is of a strategic importance to Europe, then that is a great place to go. It's super competitive, so you really do have to provide something of strategic importance. But that is 2.7 million equity-free, and then up to 10 million for the first tranche in investment. And then for the scale-ups, it's 10 to 30 million on rounds of between 60 and 150. So the money is there, right? I think that what we are less good at in Europe, for example, definitely in the US, is at taking these solutions, providing marketplaces that are big enough. So these can be government marketplaces. I'm talking about, let's purchase together. And there are some mechanisms, but they still tend to be very fringe mechanisms. So why don't we aggregate demand for these problems that we know that we have that are common to all of us, and provide a much better marketplace for these founders and scale-ups to be able to sell into. And I think that is a really concrete way in which government can help, and it's not through grants. It is, I think that was the really interesting thing also of the German sovereign agency. Tech sovereign, no, forgive me. So it was the fact, she made the point that it was absolutely about buying a service. This is not a grant. That is validating there is a market demand, market pull for what you're doing.
Yeah, but we have to make it easier. Yeah.
And we, in recent years, have been dealing with a number of crises. We've had COVID, we've had tariffs, sanctions, all number of global crises popping up, but nonetheless, open source persists, and it's these invisible roads and bridges that connect all of society. It's contributed towards and benefited from globalization. So from your perspective, what are the major challenges and opportunities that lie ahead when it comes to building digital resilience in open source within and across borders? A small question for you.
Just Yeah.
I can start.
Do you want to start?
Yeah. So I think the fact that open source, you cannot put any restrictions on either use or basically use. So I think or contributions to it. So I think that might be something that if we're looking at critical infrastructure. Coming back to my point of we're not just waging war on a battlefield, it is about digital and critical infrastructure coming under attack, and that's why we have the CRA as well, then that might be a real challenge. And again, we have to ask real questions about whether that is suitable or not, and not be afraid if the answer is no, really we can't do that. It just exposes us. It opens up a vulnerability that is just too serious for us to even contemplate. That would be definitely one. And I had another one, but I've completely forgotten it, so I'll pass on.
Sure. It's a good start, though. So challenges and opportunities, you said, right?
Yes.
I think what's positive is that in Europe we are recognizing our dependence on foreign tech, and that we need to do something about this. On November 18th, there is the Franco-German Summit, where European member states are going to commit to building more digital sovereign infrastructure and workspace in Europe. This is at the level of the president of France is coming, Macron, the chancellor of Germany, European Commission president. I will be there too. And what's interesting is that as soon as that message came out that they are all gathering, digital sovereignty is important, etc., the organizers on the French and German side started getting calls from the US Embassy, having questions and raising concerns. So that sounds concerning, but at the same time, that to me sounds like we're on the right track. We are working towards our own sovereign future, and we need to keep on adding on to that and improving and strengthening our digital infrastructure. Yeah.
So kind of different angle on this, because I think that the thing I'm fearful of is that, so CRA is coming, we've got NIS2, we've got these directives coming from Europe, and that we aim at focusing on minimum compliance as opposed to actually designing in resilience into systems, because I think we're kind of trying to plaster it on or bolt it on, and we're now also creating markets for consulting and advisory services and audit services and all the rest of it, and we end up kind of getting enmeshed and entangled, and there's nothing a government department likes better than a good report. It was like we go in and do an assessment, we have a report, now I've got a report. The work hasn't happened yet, so to actually go and fix it, it's a systemic fix, so you've got to go back and fix some of these issues, but it is one of those problems that we've been grappling with, and through generations of technology for all time, like from the point of view of kind of modern government using digital technologies. So we haven't quite figured out how to do this yet. But if we don't start doing it now, we now have this kind of crippling debt that we have to try and figure out how we pay off. So we can do all of the regulatory pieces at the moment, and it's going to work for the go-forward stuff. It's like, how are we going to deal with some of those bigger issues? And there's a massive opportunity to do something there, so that like it is there, but it's a hard problem to solve.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't think no individual company can come along and go, oh, here's a silver bullet. The silver bullet salesman will be selling out based on this stuff at the moment, but there is none. So we need to figure that out in a different way.
It's about funding the right organizations, the right communities.
Yeah.
To wrap everything up, we've had a very far-ranging discussion with some fantastic examples from your rich areas of practice. We've talked about safety, but continuity, how to engage with legacy, but also to look to the future when it comes to governing, sustaining, and maintaining open source. And I know that it is a very large challenge that lies before us, but with these three incredible people and all of you in the room, I remain very hopeful. With that, thank you to my panelists.
Thank you.